Everybody joining me up next here on the show. We're going to look back a little bit at Sunbelt Media Days and do kind of a Sunbelt preview. And actually, for us here at Troy Trojans, we starting up practice on the 31st. So when you hear this, that will be going on. Joining me is Matt Stewart, play-by-play, ESPN Networks, Georgia Public Broadcasting, anchored Sunbelt Media Days last week for ESPN Plus. And Matt, appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely, Phillip. Pleasure to be on.
Yeah, I told y'all fair. I've been looking to reach out to you recently to have you on. Just let you know, I've been a fan of yours for a long time. I still remember watching you on CSS way back. That was one of my go-to for SEC and anything Southeast sports. So again, appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely, those were fun days back in the CSS days, and we covered a lot of sports in the Southeast. So still miss it to this day, but moving on.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Sometimes I would look forward to y'all's broadcast that they would re-air during the week. Just a different element that you guys were bringing with the alternate broadcast and everything. But yeah, last week, of course, you did that of course alongside Rocky Bowman with the Sunbelt Media Days. Unlike SEC, just 2 days, just 2 days.
Yeah, exactly.
What was kind of like some of your overall takeaways from last week?
Well, I guess overall takeaways from Sunbelt Football Media Days is just the vast number of teams that are having to replace a lot. Troy being in that group that, for whatever reason, whether it be graduation, a lot of teams transfer portal, the Marshall, Georgia State, Coastal Carolina, all those teams kind of come to mind for whatever reason. Different reasons, all of them. They lost a lot of players in the transfer portal, and they brought a lot of players in via the transfer portal. So it makes it really hard to kind of prognosticate and project what those teams are going to be when you just don't know any of these players. Some of them are accomplished players from other programs. Some are players that were big-time stars in high school, never got on the field with the Power Conference program. Now they're coming to the group of 5. Let's see how they do. So it makes it very difficult. In fact, Rocky and I were talking about it. It's so much different than, the pre-COVID days. Everything is kind of demarked by that COVID period there, and everything just kind of got tossed up in the air and landed wherever. And now we're picking up the pieces and figuring it out. But pre-COVID, before this, wild transfer portal days where you could just go, no sit out, you could go anywhere, there were no restrictions. You pretty much, media day wasn't that hard. You got the preseason prospectus from the school, which most of them don't even do anymore. And you knew who was coming back, who played on the team last year. If they hadn't graduated, good chance they were going to be back next year. In the depth chart, if a player graduated, next player up on the depth chart was probably going to be the player who replaced him on the depth chart. Now it's just totally different. And the other thing that strikes me coming out of this, and I know we'll talk about favorites, is, App State, simply because they bring so many people back, they are the favorites to win the conference this year in my mind, and I don't think there's any doubt about that. Now, whether that's what plays out over the next 3-4 months remains to be seen. But as we sit here getting ready to step into August and the start of preseason camp, they clearly look like the strongest team in the conference to me.
Yeah, I know. Just looking through some of the teams, the preseason magazines and other stuff, you look at the rosters and I follow Sunbelt because I follow Troy. And it's like I don't know these teams. I mean, you think it's wild. Now the Power 4 level. Look at SEC teams. It's a different level with these guys. You'll see like half a roster is just completely flipped on a lot of these teams.
Yeah, well, that's it's like I said. I think I even said it on the air. The blessing and the curse for the Sun Belt is the blessing is it's emerged as the best group of 5 or non-autonomy, as the Sun Belt Conference like to call it, conference out there. That's the blessing is it's so competitive. 12 of the 14 teams in the conference last year reached 6 overall wins and got to a bowl game. That's just crazy numbers right there. That's really kind of reflective of what you see in the SEC, where only a couple of teams don't go to bowl games. And that's pretty much what happened in the Sun Belt last year. So it's reflective on a different level. It's not power conference level by any means, but it's group of 5. It's just right below. And certainly the teams in, the Sun Belt Conference are competitive with power conference programs, some of them, not at the upper echelon, not at the Georgia, Alabama, LSU kind of level, but we see teams in Sun Belt go in and beat teams from the SEC every once in a while, and certainly teams from the Big Ten or the ACC, they knock them off. But the point is this: they get rated. That's the curse of it. Is the Sun Belt produces so many great players, and specifically at the skill position, at the running back position, or at the wide receiver position, at the quarterback position, in particular, linebacker, secondary position, not so much on the lines. It does happen on the offensive and the defensive lines, probably the offensive line less than anybody else, any other position group. But the Sun Belt just gets rated mercilessly by SEC and ACC. If the player had a great year in the Sun Belt, there's a great chance that player is going to get an opportunity to jump to a power conference program. And more often than not, they do. And who can blame them? They're getting paid significant money to make that jump that Sun Belt programs just simply can't pay in this day and age of pay for play is what I call it. I don't even call it NIL because it's not even NIL. There's some examples of NIL, but most of it's just flat out pay for play is what it is. And so that's the blessing and the curse for the Sun Belt.
Yeah, I mean, even Nick Saban was, when he was still at Alabama, was saying, it's NIL is not being used the way it was designed.
No. I mean, it's a joke. That's why I don't even call it. That's why I don't even want to call it in conversations like this. I don't even want to call it NIL because it's not.
Yeah,
I'd say we're 90% of the time it's not NIL. Players are just flat out getting paid like the professional football players, and if that's the way they want it to be, then that's fine. Just don't call it NIL. Just call it what it is. Give them a contract. Make them sign a contract. And they can't just at the end of the year decide to go somewhere else. Man, you got a contract. You're here.
Yeah, I'm 1% behind you on that one. And the great thing, though, you look at Sun Belt now, which they haven't had in years past. There's a possibility to be in the college football playoff with 4 teams. That was not going to happen, but now you get a team gets on a run, goes undefeated. And especially now with there only being 4 power conferences, it opens the door for a group of 5 teams to get in, and Sun Belt's right there, and we know they got quality teams.
Yeah, not any more so than before because they amended it. It was going to be the 5 power conference and then the 6th conference champion, the best 6th conference champion, a group of 5 champion is what we're talking about here, was going to get in. So they just changed it. Now it's going to be 4 plus 1 and 5, and now 7 at-large teams instead of 6 at-large teams. So, I mean, in that regard, it's no more wide open than it was before the collapse of Pac-12, but it's still open. My problem and my concern with the Sun Belt is that it's such a competitive league that, kind of like the SEC, but the SEC won't have this because the SEC is going to be getting 4 and 5 teams in the college football playoff every year. But like the SEC, it's so strong, they're going to cannibalize each other. It's so difficult for a team to go undefeated, which I think, when you talk about who that group of 5 champion is, the best conference champion that gets in the college football playoff, I think you're talking about a team that's going to have to run the table, and go 12-0 or 13-0, including the conference championship game. That's going to be very difficult to happen, I think, in the Sun Belt. You saw Liberty last year. They were the team that would have been that team in the playoff if the playoff had been last year. And they went and got drilled by Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl, playing in a weaker conference. I don't mind saying it. Conference USA is a weaker conference. That's my dog in the background, by the way. I think that it's going to be difficult for the Sun Belt to be able to do that. I'm not saying it won't be possible. James Madison was 10-0 before they suffered their first loss. But I think that it's going to be a difficult proposition for the Sun Belt. But I think it's the best conference.
So before we talk to your favorites, which you already gave us that team, Appalachian State, which I was going to get into them. But Detroit Trojans, of course, where I'm at in Dothan, less than an hour, about 45 minutes to an hour away is Troy. Right. Obviously, back-to-back Sun Belt champions, new coach, about new everything, new quarterback, new running back.
New
defense.
everything, new
Yeah,
coaching staff. Yeah, I mean, just all across the board, brand new. And if not brand new, I mean, it's not to say that every player in the program is brand new, but the starters are going to be brand new. There's only bringing back 3 starters now that Chris Lewis can't play this year. There's only going to be 3 starters, back from last year's team.
yeah, it almost really like you look at and they've got good players. I feel like they have good players there, but it's kind of like an unknown. You just don't know how
Yeah.
they're going to mesh together. But what from what you have seen, and then obviously you got to talk to Coach Parker last week and everything around him. Just what's your feel around the program?
Well, number one, about Coach Parker, I think he's great. I mean, he looks and talks and plays the part of a head coach. He's been in power conference programs. He comes from Notre Dame, where he was the offensive coordinator. He was at West Virginia before that as the offensive coordinator with Neil Brown, of course, who was the former Troy coach. And that's really kind of his connection to the program. And of course, he and Neil were teammates briefly at the University of Kentucky back in their playing days. And so they've been along, and he's, Parker's been at Duke and he's been at Purdue. He was actually the interim coach at Purdue back in 2016 and went 0-6. I don't count that against him. Interim job is impossible. I mean, that's a losing proposition right there. You show me an interim coach with a winning record, and I'll show you a guy who got promoted to head coach. It just doesn't happen. So I like Coach Parker. I believe he's a solid coach. He's got a great resume and background, but he hadn't been a head coach, so there, a real head coach. So that's an unknown right there. You're going from a defensive-minded head coach in John Summerall, who's now at Tulane, to an offensive-minded head coach now in Jared Parker. So there's an unknown. And then, Gunnar Watson is no longer your quarterback. I mean, Goose Crowder might be the guy. I think he's 9 for 13 in his career. So he's an unknown if he ends up being the quarterback. And if he's not, an even greater unknown is the quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
You lose Kamani Vidal, who gets drafted in the 6th round by the Chargers, who was the offensive player of the year in the Sun Belt Conference last year. And you got some guys that are stepping into that role. And I think at the running back position out of all of them, that might be the one where they, hurt the least. And maybe the offensive line, they got some guys back there in Daniel King and Eli Russ. But on the defensive side of the ball, my goodness, they lost, first team all Sun Belt players on the defensive side of the ball that I don't know that they can just plug and play and substitute and replace. So to me, those are the things. They got players, but we just don't know about them, which makes it hard to predict. And which is why I was really surprised that they were picked second in the Sun Belt West. I think it was just really more out of, the coaches vote in that preseason poll. I think it's just really more than anything else, just respect for what the Troy program had done the last couple of years. And I'm cool with that. I just don't think, based upon what they have returning and what other teams have returning, I don't think they're number 2 in the Sun Belt West. Maybe they will be, but as I'm sitting here right today, just comparing, who's back and who isn't, I can't pick them number 2 in the West.
Well, one thing they got going for them, they've done pretty well when they've got a guy with a Kentucky background, with Neil Brown and John Summerall. That Kentucky pipeline has worked.
And now
so
Parker
far.
too,
yeah. So, well, just ignore that those 3 years between John Summerall and Neil Brown. They were Chip Lindsey.
I was really surprised too. I mean, I thought Chip would do well. That just goes to show you the resume. That's great. That gets you in the door. That gets you the job. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to do a great job, because they did.
All right, I'm going to do something dangerous here because, like I said, I am close to Troy, so I'm going to mention South Alabama. So, that's a big rivalry between the two. So there's little heat, and of course, I'm a student at Troy, but South Alabama too. Of course, Kane Womack going to Alabama, be the defense coordinator there, Major Applewhite 7, and that's a good situation for them, having some familiarity. It's like, you got a new head coach, but he was your offense coordinator. I kind of look at him as replacing Carter Bradley. Gio Lopez played well in the bowl game. They did lose Colin Lacey, best receiver, but Voisin coming back receiver, I think, is big if he can stay healthy. What's kind of like your thoughts on South Alabama?
Yeah, they got they're from a replacing stars and starters standpoint, they're not in the same boat as Troy. They do have to replace Carter Bradley, who signed undrafted free agent with the Raiders, and Gio Lopez, as you pointed out, did get a chance to play in the bowl game and light up Eastern Michigan. He's going to provide them a little bit something different. And Coach Applewhite, when we talked to him at Media Days, kind of alluded to this. He's going to give them an athleticism at that position that Carter Bradley did not. So you might see an offense where the quarterback's running a little bit more, that's utilizing the mobility of the quarterback a little bit more than they did in the past. So watch for that. But they're in a better situation at quarterback. They did lose LaDamian Webb, their 1,000-yard rusher. They got some guys sitting there in the wings, kind of similar to Troy. They got some guys that have played the position and done well at the position. Now can they step up and be the number one guy? And you're right, Devin Voisin coming back is huge, along with Jamal Pritchett. So they should be okay at the wide receiver position. So they were a defense that allowed just 17 points per game last year. That's the question mark with me. Are they going to be as good defensively without Kane Womack there as they are now with Major Applewhite? But you pointed out of the 5 new coaches in the Sun Belt this year, out of 14, 5 new ones, that was the only situation where a guy got promoted from within. And why not? South Alabama's coming off the best 3-year run they've had in their history, and they won a bowl game for the first time. So it made sense. It made logical sense. Applewhite's been a head coach before. He got 2 years at Houston and didn't get a 3rd year. Probably got fired a little bit too soon, but he got drilled by Army in their last bowl game. And really, when you get beat as bad as they did, I think it was 70-something. They gave up 70 to Army in their bowl game. And when that happens, you're just throwing yourself at the mercy of the university president, who already said when Applewhite got hired 2 years prior that we fired coaches that go 8-4. Well, Applewhite went 8-4, 8-5, and got fired. And then he spent the last 2 years after he got fired by Houston. Then he went to the Nick Saban coach rehab assignment clinic that all the coaches go to, kind of, rebuild the resume and the confidence, and then got hired by South Alabama. And now here he is as a head coach again. I think they'll be fine. I think they're going to be okay. I got them picked 4th in the Sun Belt West. So they'll be right there, middle of the pack. We've seen 4th, 5th in the Sun Belt West. That's going to get you a bowl game. So, I think that means they're going to be competitive. They're going to be okay.
So, just a side note, the Nick Saban Rehabilitation Clinic, if I can get the words out of my mouth, I guess would it transfer to Athens now? I guess Kirby take it over.
Oh, wow, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, we'll see. We'll take a look at his hires and see, what he does there with his hires. But Saban just did the long list of coaches who got fired, got in trouble, went and kind of restarted their careers is long. Lane Kiffin, Steve Sarkisian now at Texas, Lane Kiffin now at Ole Miss, Butch Jones now at Arkansas State, Major Applewhite now at South Alabama. I'm probably missing a pretty obvious one off the top of my head, but those just 4 immediately just jump to mind very quickly. Guys who got fired because they got in trouble, got fired just simply didn't win enough, and went. Now they're back in the head coaching business again.
Yeah, I'm just surprised Brian Harsin didn't find his way over there. But I will transition on to the favorites before I get in and get some trouble.
Well, he was Auburn now. I don't know. There might be limitations on what Alabama will do as far as taking a coach in.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But he couldn't get any worse than doghouse with Auburn people than he already was. So it wouldn't have been that bad. You mentioned earlier Appalachian State as your favorite. And actually I had Adam Witten, the voice of the Mountaineers, on the pod a few weeks ago, and we talked a lot with Joey Aguilar. And that's got to, in your opinion, is he probably the best quarterback in the conference? And that helps you out. I know Jordan McLeod is at Texas State too, so I know he's in that conversation.
Well, he's right there. He's right there. And, it was, to me, when they were picking their offensive preseason player of the year, there's one of 2 choices you can go. You can go Aguilar, just based on what they did last year. You can go Aguilar, or you can go Jordan McLeod. And I think Aguilar, McLeod might have been the obvious choice if he had stayed at James Madison, with him transferring from James Madison to Texas State, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. But I think that kind of opened the door for Aguilar to be the guy. So, and there was only 2 quarterbacks during the 12-game regular season who threw more touchdown passes than Joey Aguilar last year. And that was Jaden Daniels, Heisman Trophy winner from LSU, and Bo Nix, former Auburn quarterback, who went and did a little career rehab himself at Auburn and turned into a first-round draft pick. So, yeah, I mean, so Aguilar in my mind, I wouldn't have had a problem if we'd been sitting here talking about Jordan McLeod, but I can see why they chose Joey Aguilar. Had a tremendous season last year. His story's a good one. This time a year ago, he wasn't even the starting quarterback. He was not projected to be the starting quarterback. It was going to be, somebody else. He gets an opportunity there early in the season and never gave up the job. So, yeah.
Yeah, and my last question, talking about what Appalachian State, of course, we mentioned Aguilar, and they've got stable running backs coming back. Their best receivers are coming back. Defense, Nate Johnson, tremendous player, 7.5 sacks. But just the fundamentals, intangibles. What about this App State team makes you believe they are the best team, the favorite for the conference?
Well, I mean, they've been there, done that. I mean, they got a history. I mean, they've established themselves as a program. They've got that swagger, and they brought that swagger into the conference. From FCS, where they had won 3 consecutive national championships and had one of the biggest FCS upsets in college football history when they went into the Big House and knocked off Michigan. So they had that swagger. Started, if people don't remember, maybe, but they started slow. I mean, I remember doing a game there in 2014, their first year in the conference, and South Alabama, Joey Jones, then the head coach, went in there and they smoked them. I mean, just absolutely smoked them. I mean, beat them like 47-14 there at Kid Brewer Stadium. And the folks, and it was their first year in FBS. They just moved up. And the folks there in the press box and there, I mean, they were like openly, questioning whether App State should have made the jump up. At that time, it didn't look good. But Scott Satterfield was the head coach, who's now at Cincinnati, if I'm not mistaken. He's moved. He went Louisville. Yeah, I think he's now at Cincinnati. He went Louisville to Cincinnati. And, people questioned whether they made the right move. But before the season was over, they turned it around and they won a bunch of games in a row, and they haven't slowed down since. 2022, was a weird season for them. That's the year they knocked off Texas A&M out there. They beat Troy on the Hail Mary, and they're like 3-0, and everybody's talking about, was talking about App State in the month of September like they were talking about James Madison a year ago, and then things kind of fell apart. And then last year, they started the season 3-4, and, Sean Clark might have legitimately been on the hot seat, at 3-4 had they not turned it around. But they did turn it around, and they won 5 in a row and got to the conference championship game, lost to Troy, and now here they are as the preseason favorites to win, in most people's minds, to win the Sun Belt Conference. They have that swagger. They got that program. They sell out their stadium. It's one of the great venues in Group of 5, no doubt. In all of football, I would say. We just qualified as Group of 5 simply because of the size of the stadium. It's not like a Bryant-Denny Stadium. It's not like a Sanford Stadium. You can see my dog here in the background.
It's all good.
So, yeah, she just wants to be a part of the conversation, I think. So, anyway, yeah, that's the intangibles for App are those. Those are the intangibles.
It's going to be a fun season. It is every year in the Fun Belt, as we all like to call them, because it is fun watching these teams play. And Matt, it's been fun having you on the show. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. If the listeners and viewers want to catch you out online, where can they find you?
On Twitter, I'm at Matt Stewart TV. I got a Facebook page at Matt Stewart Sports. I have a podcast. I don't, I kind of do it to this point. I've done it during Sunbelt basketball and Sunbelt baseball season. Still kicking around whether I do it during football season. I don't know. Just simply because I'm so busy. I don't know whether I can carve out time for that or not. But anyway, you can always catch me on Twitter at Matt Stewart Sport, at Matt Stewart TV on Twitter, at Matt Stewart Sports on my Facebook page.
All right, everybody go check Matt out. And Matt, I appreciate the time, and I hope we can do this again sometime down the road.
Absolutely. Call me anytime.